As the sun began to dip behind the Pacific horizon, the airplane started its slow descent toward Los Angeles. The usual buzz of end-of-flight chatter was absent. No clinking glasses, no light conversations, just a heavy silence. Captain Rivers' voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our descent shortly. Please return to your seats, fasten seat belts, and stow all tray tables. Cabin crew, prepare for landing." His tone was professional, but those who had been paying attention caught a slight tension in his voice, like a thread pulled too tight. In the rear galley, Jessica heard every word, and with it, the weight in her chest deepened. She reached for a bottle of water but didn't take a sip. Her hands trembled. She knew what was coming. She imagined the moment vividly. The security officer standing at the door, her name called in front of everyone, heads turning, whispers rippling down the aisle. She had walked hundreds of flights with grace and control, but this time she would walk with shame. Not because she had made a mistake, but because she finally knew what the mistake really was. In seat 1A, Ethan sat quietly, his phone face down on his tray table, seatbelt fastened, blazer neatly adjusted. He wasn't watching the runway approach. He was watching the final minutes of this flight play out. Every stiff movement, every stolen glance, every uncomfortable silence from the passengers around him. They weren't looking at him the way they had earlier. They weren't looking at him at all. Because now, they knew. The plane touched down with a soft thud, rolling to a smooth stop on the tarmac. Captain Rivers came over the speaker once more. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Los Angeles. Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign is off. Thank you for flying with us." In the cockpit, he placed the handset down slowly. He'd handled turbulence, emergencies, even engine alerts, but nothing had left a pit in his stomach quite like this flight. At the cabin door, a security officer in uniform stepped inside and spoke clearly. Flight attendant Jessica Miller. Every head turned. No one pretended not to hear. Jessica stood in the aisle, frozen. Her hands gripped one another tightly. Her lips parted, but no words came. The officer stepped closer. "You are requested to exit the aircraft immediately for debriefing in cooperation with airline operations." Jessica swallowed hard. Her eyes flicked just once to seat 1A. Ethan's gaze met hers. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't gloating. He was just watching. Calm, steady. And somehow that made it worse. She gave a tiny nod to the officer. "Yes, I'll come." And she walked, step by step, past the seats she had once commanded with authority. Past the passengers who had once smiled at her and now stared quietly. Past the curtain, past business class. Until she reached the door and stepped off the plane. In a private lounge near the terminal, Rachel Daniels waited by a large window, watching the aircraft pull in. She didn't pace. She didn't sigh. She stood with her arms crossed, the reflection of the plane visible in the glass. Moments later, Ethan entered with quiet steps, escorted by a senior relations officer. Rachel turned and gave him a small, respectful nod. "Are you all right?" she asked. Ethan gave a faint smile. "I've had worse." She gestured for him to sit. "I wanted to speak with you before we meet the board. Internal reviews have started. Jessica has been suspended without pay pending a full investigation." Ethan nodded, listening. "We're also implementing mandatory bias training for all flight crews and rolling out a new passenger treatment protocol, especially concerning assumptions and upgrades." He didn't say anything right away. Then, and the apology? "She wrote one. Would you like to read it?" He paused, then shook his head. "Not yet." Rachel set the paper down. "This wasn't just about you. I know you know that. This happens more than anyone admits. But what happened here, it's not going to be ignored." Ethan leaned forward slightly. "Then don't let it become just a policy. Make it a shift in culture. Not just rules, but expectations. Not just consequences, but understanding." Rachel nodded slowly. "We will." Before he left, she asked, "Do you want to join the meeting with the board?" Ethan smiled faintly. "No, I've said what I needed to say. Now it's your sky." They shook hands. Weeks passed. The incident never made headlines. No names were released. But within the airline and beyond, it became known. During crew training sessions, instructors didn't refer to it with drama or scandal. They simply said, "You remember what happened on that Tokyo LAX flight, right?" And heads nodded. It became a reference point. A quiet but powerful moment of reckoning. Jessica, meanwhile, did not return to work. She didn't fight it. She didn't issue a statement. She didn't post anything online. She simply stopped. But she didn't disappear. Instead, she began attending workshops on bias, on empathy, on leadership, not because she was told to, but because she finally wanted to understand. And little by little, something inside her began to shift. She took a part-time job at a local community center helping underserved youth prepare for careers in aviation. She never told them who she used to be. She just showed up and helped. Back in the airline's HQ, Ethan sat across from a panel of leaders as they signed off on a new employee code of conduct. His name wasn't on the document, but his presence was in every line. The final clause read, "A seat is more than a number. It is a space of trust. Never make someone prove they belong where they've already paid to be." As he walked out of the boardroom, a young flight attendant in training caught his eye and smiled slightly. It wasn't the smile of a fan. It was the smile of recognition. And Ethan? He simply nodded. Because change doesn't always need to shout. Sometimes it begins when someone stays seated and refuses to be moved.